The most feared man in Korea was standing in his mansion kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning, not negotiating billion-dollar deals, not commanding powerful men, not running an empire. He was staring at a cookbook and panicking because for the first time in his life, Kang Min-jae wanted to do something much harder than facing enemies. He wanted to make breakfast for his wife, the same wife whose speech had shattered every insecurity he had carried for years. The same wife who had publicly declared her love while he sat frozen in disbelief. The same wife who was now asleep upstairs, completely unaware that the intimidating mafia boss feared burning toast more than any business rival. But what happened next would become the beginning of the happiest chapter of their lives. If you love Korean billionaire romance and mafia love stories like this, subscribe now to @Physial_Threads and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. The night of the awards ceremony changed everything. Not because Zinal won an award. Not because hundreds of people witnessed her speech. Not even because Min-jae finally learned the truth. It changed everything because, for the first time since their marriage began, there were no more secrets standing between them. The drive home that night felt completely different. The city lights shimmered outside the car windows. Seoul moved around them as it always had. Yet inside the vehicle, something had fundamentally shifted. Neither of them wanted the night to end. Neither wanted to return to silence. For years they had sat beside each other, carrying feelings they were too afraid to express. Now the silence was gone. And strangely enough, both of them felt nervous. The beautiful kind of nervous. The kind that appears when a dream finally becomes real. Min-jae sat beside her in the back seat. His hand remained wrapped around hers. Neither had let go since leaving the ballroom. Every few minutes he glanced toward her, still unable to fully believe what had happened, still replaying her words. I married him because I loved him. The sentence echoed repeatedly inside his mind. Years of loneliness had convinced him that nobody could ever truly choose him. Not the powerful CEO, not the billionaire, not the feared man, just him. Yet Zinal had. She always had. And what she didn't know was that he was already making a promise to himself. Never again. Never again would he allow fear to speak louder than love. Never again would he assume instead of asking. Never again would he hide his heart from the woman who had protected it for years. But what happens next changes everything. When they finally arrived at the mansion, neither rushed inside. The grand home stood illuminated beneath the night sky. The gardens glowed softly beneath elegant lights. For a few moments, they simply stood near the entrance. Neither speaking, both smiling. Finally, Zinal laughed softly. We're acting strange. Min-jae laughed too. It surprised both of them. Because genuine laughter had become rare for him. Especially the kind that came naturally. The kind she always seemed capable of bringing out. I think we're learning how to be husband and wife again, he admitted. Her eyes softened. Maybe for the first time. The truth settled gently between them. For years they had been married. But tonight felt like a beginning. Not an ending. A beginning. One built on honesty. One built on trust. One built on the kind of love neither of them would ever take for granted again. The following morning arrived with something unfamiliar inside the mansion. Peace. Not the quiet peace of distance. Not the polite peace of avoidance. Real peace. The kind that comes when two people finally understand each other. Zinal woke first. Sunlight filtered softly through the bedroom curtains. For several moments, she simply lay still, watching Min-jae sleep. A smile appeared on her face. The intimidating man feared across Korea somehow looked younger while asleep. Softer. More vulnerable. Almost boyish. It reminded her of something she had always believed. Beneath all the power and influence was a man who had simply wanted to be loved. A man who never knew how to ask for it. Eventually, she slipped quietly out of bed. What she didn't know was that Min-jae woke up moments later and immediately began planning something ridiculous. Breakfast. The idea sounded simple. Unfortunately, he had almost no experience cooking. His staff usually handled everything. Business meetings were easier. International negotiations were easier. Cooking was terrifying. Still, he refused to give up. Nearly an hour later, the kitchen looked like a battlefield. Ingredients covered counters. Several recipes lay open. One pan had already been sacrificed. Another was dangerously close. The staff watched from a distance, trying not to laugh. Nobody dared interrupt, because their intimidating boss looked more determined than ever. When Zinal finally entered the kitchen, she stopped completely. The sight before her was impossible. Kang Min-jae, the feared billionaire, wearing an apron, holding a spatula, looking completely lost. For several seconds, she simply stared. Then laughter exploded from her. Real laughter. The kind that makes your stomach hurt. Min Jae looked embarrassed. Then he started laughing too. And somehow that moment became more meaningful than any luxury gift. Because it wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was real. Their first memory after the speech. And neither would ever forget it. Meanwhile, something else was beginning to change. For years Min Jae had hidden everything inside. Stress, fear, worry, pain. He believed protecting people meant carrying burdens alone. But Zinel had other ideas. One evening, she found him standing alone on a balcony overlooking Seoul. The city sparkled beneath the night sky. Normally, she would have respected his space. Tonight, she walked directly beside him. What are you thinking about? A simple question. Yet years ago, he would have answered with a vague response. Not tonight. Work. She nodded. What about work? He paused. Then something remarkable happened. He told her. Not part of it. All of it. The pressure. The responsibility. The concerns. The uncertainty. Every thought he normally kept hidden. Zinel listened quietly. Not interrupting. Not judging. Simply listening. When he finished, he felt strangely lighter. As though a weight had disappeared. That's when she taught him one of the most important lessons of their marriage. You don't have to carry everything alone. The sentence seemed simple, yet it changed something inside him. Because nobody had ever truly told him that before. Nobody. And from that day forward, a new habit began forming between them. Whenever something bothered one of them, they talked about it. Immediately. Not days later. Not weeks later. Immediately. At first it felt strange. Then it became natural. Then it became one of the strongest foundations of their relationship. Months earlier, misunderstandings had nearly destroyed them. Now communication was healing them. And what neither realized was that their happiest chapter was only beginning. One evening, while organizing a bookshelf, Zinel accidentally discovered something hidden behind several old folders. A journal. Plain. Simple. Worn with age. At first she assumed it belonged to someone else. Then she opened it. And froze. Because every page belonged to Min Jae. And every page was about her. For several moments, Zinel simply stared at the journal in her hands. The cover was ordinary. Nothing about it suggested it contained something important. Yet her heart was already beating faster. Because Min Jae was not the type of man who kept journals. He barely kept personal belongings. His life was built around discipline, schedules, responsibilities, and control. The existence of a journal alone felt surprising. The fact that every page appeared to be about her felt impossible. Slowly, she sat down near the window. The evening sunlight spilled softly across the room. Outside, the mansion garden swayed gently beneath a warm breeze. Inside, her entire world was about to change once again. She opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Neat, careful, controlled. Yet beneath the controlled handwriting, she could already sense emotion. The first entry had been written years earlier, long before their wedding, long before either of them knew where their story would lead. I saw her again today. Zinel immediately covered her mouth. A smile appeared before she could stop it. She continued reading. She spent 20 minutes helping an elderly volunteer carry equipment across the event hall. Nobody was watching. There were no cameras. No reason to impress anyone. She just did it. I don't understand people like her. The next sentence made tears gather in her eyes. Maybe that's why I can't stop thinking about her. She sat frozen. Completely frozen. Because this was not the Min Jae she knew. The world knew a confident billionaire. A feared leader. A powerful man who always seemed certain of himself. Yet these pages revealed someone entirely different. Someone vulnerable. Someone confused by his own feelings. Someone who had fallen in love long before he ever admitted it. She turned another page. And another. And another. Each entry revealed moments she never knew he remembered. The day she spilled coffee during a charity meeting. The afternoon she defended a junior employee from unfair criticism. The evening she laughed so hard she couldn't stop. Tiny memories. Small details. Moments she herself had nearly forgotten. Yet Min Jae remembered all of them. Every single one. What she didn't know was that those small moments had become treasures to him. Proof that genuine goodness still existed. Proof that not everyone wore masks. Proof that she was different. Hours passed. The mansion grew quieter. Night slowly arrived. Still she kept reading. Then she reached an entry written shortly before his proposal. And suddenly tears began falling. I am afraid. The sentence stood alone. Simple. Honest. Painfully honest. The next lines broke her heart. If she says no, I will lose the one person who makes the world feel less lonely. I have faced powerful men. I have survived betrayal. I have carried responsibilities most people never see. But the thought of losing her terrifies me. Zinel closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Because she finally understood something important. For years she thought she was the patient one, the hopeful one, the one quietly waiting for love. But Min Jae had been waiting too, loving her silently, protecting her silently, dreaming about a future together silently. Both of them had suffered from the same fear, the fear of not being chosen. And yet somehow love had chosen both of them. Meanwhile, Min Jae was already approaching the library. He had been searching for a business file. Instead, he found something unexpected. His wife crying. His journal resting in her lap. For one horrifying second, panic filled him. Then embarrassment. Then complete surrender. There was no escaping now. Zinel looked up. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Then she stood and crossed the room. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around him. Tightly. As though she never wanted to let go. Min Jae immediately understood. She had read everything. Every insecurity. Every fear. Every confession he never intended anyone to see. To his surprise, she wasn't laughing. She wasn't teasing him. She wasn't embarrassed. She was holding him as if she had discovered something precious. Something worth protecting. When she finally pulled back, tears still glistened in her eyes. You love me that much. His ears immediately turned red. A rare sight. An impossible sight. One that would have shocked anyone who knew him. He looked away. And somehow that made him look even more adorable. Zinel laughed through her tears. Then kissed his cheek. The simple gesture completely defeated him. And for the next hour, they sat together reading portions of the journal. Sometimes laughing. Sometimes crying. Sometimes simply holding hands. Each page became another bridge connecting two hearts that had spent years separated by silence. But what happens next changes everything. A few days later, Zinel proposed something unexpected. A date. Not a public event. Not a business dinner. Not a charity gala. A real date. Just the two of them. Min Jae immediately agreed. The staff nearly fainted when they saw him leave the mansion wearing casual clothes. No expensive suit. No intimidating CEO appearance. No security entourage following closely behind. Just Min Jae. And Zinel. For the first time in years, he felt free. They spent the entire day wandering through Seoul. No schedule. No agenda. No responsibilities. Street food vendors. Bookstores. Small cafes. Hidden gardens. Simple places most billionaires never visited. And somehow those simple places became more meaningful than every luxury destination he had ever seen. Because she was there. At one point they stopped near a riverside park. The evening sun painted the water gold. Families walked nearby. Children laughed. Couples sat together beneath trees. For several moments, they simply watched the scene. Then Min Jae quietly spoke. I think I miss things. Zinel looked toward him. What things? His answer surprised even himself. Life. The word lingered between them. Because it was true. For years he had chased success. Responsibilities. Control. Yet somewhere along the way he forgot to simply live. Forgot to enjoy ordinary moments. Forgot that happiness often hides inside simple experiences. Zinel squeezed his hand. You don't have to miss them anymore. And for the first time, he truly believed her. Weeks turned into months. Their relationship continued growing stronger. Not because life became perfect, because they stopped pretending perfection was necessary. Whenever problems appeared, they discussed them. Immediately. If one felt hurt, they spoke honestly. If one felt afraid, they shared it. If one felt overwhelmed, the other listened. Communication became their greatest strength. One evening, Min Jae returned home unusually quiet. Years earlier, he would have hidden the reason. Tonight, he sat beside her on the balcony. I had a difficult day. Zinel closed her book and listened. That was all. No solutions. No interruptions. Just listening. Sometimes that was enough. And by the end of the conversation, the stress had already begun fading. The old Min Jae carried burdens alone. The new Min Jae shared them. And every time he did, their relationship grew stronger. Meanwhile, another beautiful tradition was beginning. Every Friday night became theirs. No work. No meetings. No interruptions. Only each other. Sometimes they cooked together. Usually badly. Sometimes they watched movies. Sometimes they danced in the living room. One particular evening became legendary inside the mansion. The staff would secretly talk about it for years. Music drifted softly through the house. Zinal was dancing alone while preparing dessert. She didn't know Min Jae was watching. Eventually he approached, extended his hand, and asked her to dance. She stared in complete shock. Kong Min Jae wants to dance. He nodded seriously. I have been informed this is something husbands do. She laughed so hard she nearly dropped the mixing bowl. Minutes later they were dancing slowly in the kitchen. Neither cared how ridiculous they looked. Neither cared that the dessert was forgotten. Neither cared that several staff members nearly walked into the room before quickly retreating. At that moment, happiness was enough. The kind of happiness both once believed was impossible. But what neither realized was that something even more meaningful was approaching. Because while Zinal had discovered the journal, Min Jae had been secretly planning something of his own. Something he had been preparing for months. Something connected to the very beginning of their story. And when she finally discovers what he's planning, it will become one of the most unforgettable moments of their entire marriage. The first sign that something unusual was happening appeared on a quiet Monday morning. Min Jae was smiling. Not occasionally. Not subtly. Actually smiling. The staff noticed. His assistants noticed. Even his grandfather noticed. And everyone came to the same conclusion. The powerful billionaire was hiding something. The problem was that nobody knew what. Except Min Jae. For months, he had been planning something special. Not because there was a problem to solve. Not because he was trying to earn forgiveness. Not because he felt guilty. For the first time in his life, he simply wanted to celebrate love. The kind of love he once thought existed only in movies. The kind of love he almost lost because he was too afraid to believe in it. Now that he finally understood what he had, he never wanted to take it for granted again. Meanwhile, Zinal remained completely unaware. She noticed his unusually cheerful mood. She noticed the mysterious phone calls. She noticed several meetings appearing on his calendar that somehow disappeared before she could ask about them. Whenever she questioned him, he simply smiled. That smile immediately made her suspicious. And curious. Very curious. What she didn't know was that Min Jae was preparing something that would bring their story full circle. Something connected to the day everything began. The day he first saw her. The day a simple act of kindness changed his life forever. But what happens next changes everything. One Friday evening, Min Jae returned home earlier than usual. The moment he walked through the mansion doors, Zinal knew something was different. His expression gave it away. He looked excited, nervous, almost like a man preparing to make another proposal. Without explanation, he handed her a small envelope. She raised an eyebrow. What is this? A request. A request. He nodded. Open it. Inside was a beautifully designed invitation. The moment she began reading, her heart skipped a beat. She read it once, then twice, then a third time, because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The invitation was for a private anniversary celebration, but not at a luxury hotel, not at an exclusive resort, not inside one of his many properties. The location was the charity event hall where they first met. The exact place. The exact beginning. Tears immediately gathered in her eyes. Because she understood. He wasn't celebrating their marriage. He was celebrating the moment fate brought them together. And somehow that meant even more. The following evening arrived faster than expected. As their car approached the venue, Zinal's emotions became impossible to control. Years had passed since that first encounter. Yet memories flooded back instantly. The nervous young woman trying to build a future. The powerful man quietly observing her from a distance. Neither realizing their lives were about to become forever connected. When they entered the building, she stopped completely. The hall had been transformed. Not into something luxurious. Not into something extravagant. Something meaningful. Photographs lined the walls. Images from their journey together. Their wedding. Their foundation projects. Their travels. Their happiest memories. Even some moments she didn't know had been photographed. Each picture represented a chapter of their story. A story neither would ever trade for anything. For several minutes, she simply walked through the room, looking at each memory, reliving each moment. Meanwhile, Min Jae watched quietly, the same way he watched her years ago. Only now there was no uncertainty, no fear, no doubt, only love. Eventually she turned toward him, tears shining in her eyes. You did all this? He nodded, and suddenly she threw her arms around him. The embrace nearly knocked him backward, which secretly made him very happy. For years he had dreamed of moments like this. Simple moments. Beautiful moments. Moments where neither of them had to hide how they felt. But the evening was far from over. Because Min Jae had one final surprise waiting. A surprise he had spent months preparing. As dinner ended, he gently took her hand, then led her toward a smaller room. The moment the door opened, Zinel froze. Completely froze. The room contained hundreds of letters. Hundreds. Neatly arranged. Beautifully preserved. Each one dated. Each one handwritten. She looked toward him in confusion. Min Jae smiled, then spoke softly. Those are all the things I wanted to tell you, but never had the courage to say. Her heart nearly stopped. For years he had struggled with vulnerability. Yet here stood hundreds of letters containing his heart, his thoughts, his dreams, his fears, his love. Every letter represented a moment he wished he had communicated better. A moment he wished he had spoken instead of staying silent. A moment he never wanted to lose again. Zinel picked up the first letter. Then another. Then another. The tears returned almost immediately. Some letters were funny. Some were romantic. Some were deeply emotional. One letter simply described how beautiful he thought she looked while reading a book near the garden fountain. Another described the day he realized the mansion no longer felt like a house whenever she wasn't home. One letter contained only a single sentence. I finally understand what peace feels like. She knew exactly who that sentence was about. Hours passed. Neither noticed. The world outside seemed to disappear. Only the two of them remained. Two people who had finally learned the importance of saying what they felt. And that lesson would soon lead them towards something even greater. Months later, their relationship became an inspiration to many people. Not because they were perfect, not because they never disagreed, but because they communicated. Openly, honestly, consistently. When problems appeared, they faced them together. When challenges arrived, they discussed them. When fear emerged, they talked about it before it had the chance to grow. The same communication that once seemed impossible had become their greatest strength. Meanwhile, their foundation continued expanding. More students received support. More communities benefited. More lives changed. And wherever they went, people noticed something remarkable. The intimidating billionaire who once seemed emotionally untouchable now looked genuinely happy. Not because his life became easier, because he stopped facing it alone. His grandfather often watched them with a smile. One afternoon, while sitting in the mansion garden, the old man observed them laughing together near the fountain. Then he quietly shook his head. What? Min Jae asked. The old man smiled. You finally look like a man who knows he's loved. The words hit him harder than expected. Because they were true. For most of his life, he never felt secure in love. Never felt chosen. Never felt enough. Now he did. And that confidence changed everything. Years passed. Their love continued growing. Not dramatically. Not through grand gestures every day. But through consistency. Through friendship. Through trust. Through choosing each other repeatedly. Every morning. Every evening. Every ordinary day in between. The mansion that once felt cold became warm. The silence that once created distance became comfortable. The fears that once controlled them became memories. And whenever life became difficult, they returned to one simple rule. Talk. Immediately. Honestly. Lovingly. The rule saved them countless times. Because love cannot grow where communication is absent. And communication becomes powerful when both people feel safe enough to be honest. One evening, many years after the famous speech, Min Jae and Zinel stood together on a balcony overlooking Seoul. The city lights sparkled beneath the night sky. The same city that had witnessed their struggles, their misunderstandings, their healing, their growth. For several moments, they simply stood together, comfortable in the silence. Finally, Zinel smiled. Do you ever think about that speech? Min Jae laughed softly. Every day. She leaned against him. And what do you think about? His answer came immediately. How close I came to missing the greatest gift of my life. Tears appeared in her eyes again. Happy tears this time. The kind that come from gratitude. The kind that come from knowing you've found your person. The kind that come from a love worth protecting. Min Jae kissed her forehead gently, then wrapped an arm around her shoulders. And together they watched the city lights below. Not as two people separated by fear. Not as two people trapped by misunderstanding. But as best friends. Partners. Soulmates. A husband and wife who finally learned that love grows strongest when it is spoken, protected, and shared. The years that followed became the happiest chapter of their lives. Their foundation continued changing countless lives. Their marriage became stronger with each passing year. Their home remained filled with laughter, warmth, and honest conversations. And although they never forgot the misunderstandings that once separated them, those memories no longer brought sadness. Instead, they served as reminders. Reminders of how far they had come. Reminders of what communication could heal. Reminders that love becomes most beautiful when people stop hiding from it. Most importantly, they never stopped choosing each other. Every day, again and again, until choosing each other became the most natural thing in the world. This story reminds us that love does not end when two people finally confess their feelings. In many ways, that is where real love begins. Min Jae and Zinel discovered that communication is not simply important in a relationship, it is essential. Love grows when people speak honestly. Trust grows when people feel heard. Healing happens when fears are shared instead of hidden. Their story proves that healthy relationships are not built by perfect people. They are built by people willing to communicate, listen, forgive, and choose each other every single day. Love beyond status. Trust beyond fear. Healing beyond past wounds. And loyalty that grows stronger through honesty. That became the true legacy of their story. If you made it this far, let us know where you're watching from, and comment your favorite moment below, like this video, and subscribe to _Threads for more emotional Mafia love stories.